Hello, Matthew.
How you doing, Mark?
How are you?
How you doing? Pretty good.
Good.
Doing okay?
Good. This is Mark Goldberg, UN Dispatch, speaking
Matthew,
with, as always,
Matthew Lee of Inner City Press, inside the United Nations.
So, Matthew, last time we talked, we spent a lot of time going back and forth about Sri Lanka. You know, why there isn't more of an international outcry over what's going on there. And my understanding is you have some update for us.
I do have an update, and I'll try to not be too blow by blow. But when last we spoke, there was a lot of cloak and dagger about the Security Council even getting a briefing of any kind. Mexico had, I mean, you know, in this throughout so far this year, the 6 weeks of this year, the Sri Lankan government has been what they call in kind of a final assault on the Tamil Tiger separatists in northern Sri Lanka. And in the course of this, civilians have been trapped, and there have been when last we spoke, the UN was unwilling or unable to estimate the number of civilian casualties. Said, you know, we really don't know anything. Since then, I will say this: not only people there have sent numbers that I asked the UN about, and then Human Rights Watch, which, as we'll say later in this, having some more respect for, they came out with this 2,000 figure, 2,000 civilian casualties since the beginning of the year, 5,000 injured. The UN then dispatched John Holmes, the top humanitarian. He did visit the country for 3 days. So this was what was strange, though, is at least the sort of feedback. And again, this is a very contentious issue. So I'll have to say that you hear on the Tamil side, people call it genocide, and analogize it to a variety of things. The government and also some fervent supporters of the government are adamant that anyone that even raises the civilian casualty issue is just helping terrorists. I've been now accused of being a Mossad agent by a number of one asking if more people were or comparing Gaza and Sri Lanka. But to make a long story short, Holmes's visit was pretty closely controlled by the government. They took him around. They even translated for him. I mean, I asked and got confirmed that in some of the interviews he did in an IDP camp, he allowed the Sri Lankan minister to do the translation. So people that were there said the translation was 180 degrees inaccurate. Like a woman said that her son was abducted by the army, and this was translated to Holmes as the son was killed by the Tamil Tigers. So this was a lot of questions have arisen, and Holmes has actually not come back to New York yet. He went directly to Colombia. But this is the main part of this update, is that today it was confirmed to me by a permanent 5 member who is in a position to know that tomorrow there is a briefing of the council about Sri Lanka.
And we should say today is Wednesday.
Today's Thursday.
Pardon me, is Thursday. Tomorrow is
no, I'm
Friday,
sorry. I should have dated that on. So this is
no, that's fine. So by the time you're watching this could have already happened.
This could have already happened. I think
we're living in the future.
The thing is that to not to reduce expectations. Here's the irony of it all: is that it literally is. This is sort of the lowest step of council involvement. It's a briefing behind closed doors on the humanitarian situation in Sri Lanka. But I mean, as last time we spoke, it emerged like Russia, and they're not the only ones, but some countries have really tried to keep even this outside of the council. So I have to say it's been quite a process, and in part I have to, even today actually the UN spokeswoman didn't want to confirm that the briefing is taking place. I'll say it's pretty clear that it is, and it's strange. Even one of the UN's political advisors is like, we know it's taking place tomorrow. Why wouldn't they just confirm it? It seems whether it's just kind of incompetence or sort of reflexive secrecy or a real attempt not to sort of rattle the cage of the Sri Lankan government. But unless something overnight takes place, which is always possible, this briefing will take place. And
so if this happens, or I should say if this happened, this would be progress, right? I remember we spoke 2 weeks ago. You were decrying sort of the lack of attention that the Security Council is playing to the Sri Lanka issue.
Sure. I mean, I would. I mean, again, I just don't want. I don't want to. And it's not for me. It's just the idea is obviously here. I'm very focused on like what the UN does now. Also one other just factual update. Although Ban Ki-moon, when last we spoke, had refused to call for anything sounding like a ceasefire, and had said that as long as it wasn't on the council agenda, he couldn't do so. Monday of this week, right before he went on this trip that he's gone to Africa, he came out of a meeting about Myanmar, and he took 4 questions, but I made it, my business that the 4th one be about Sri Lanka, not Myanmar, and he pulled out a piece of paper and he said, I am calling for cessation of hostilities. It is imperative that the civilians be allowed to leave. And this was then, sort of like various people in the UN were like, you see, we've done it, you know what I mean? So essentially,
so this is progress.
That is
right?
progress. I'm not trying to be
the same thing. You're also decrying the
no, absolutely. And it's not. I also want to be. I mean, it's a bit too much to be. It's not. It's obviously not about like the questions asked and the answers. But the irony is that not the irony. I mean, not to. He made that announcement, and there was this sort of. I'm just saying, sort of. What I see here. People from the 38th floor approached me and said, "Okay, you see, we've done it now." Like sort of like leave it alone. The next day, the foreign minister of Sri Lanka was quoted as saying, "There's been no call for a ceasefire. Nothing has been communicated to us. What Ban Ki-moon meant is that the Tamil Tigers should lay down their weapons." So the next day I go to the noon briefing and I say, like, is this consistent with what Ban said? And all they would say is, he said what he said. They wouldn't even confirm whether they've, conveyed it to the government of Sri Lanka. Again, I don't mean to be, it definitely was, they feel it was a step, and it was, from a position of saying he couldn't say anything because of the lack of Security Council involvement, it was some motion. There's still sort of a strange. I mean, I'll say, just for example, in the case of Sudan, when he calls for restraint by Sudan, he convenes the ambassador of Sudan, Abdul Halim Muhammad, to his office on the 38th floor and delivers that message. And then they make a point of giving a readout in the briefing. Ban Ki-moon has today, conveyed this to the ambassador of Sudan. So it's sort of. And I think what the people upstairs try to say is that the Sri Lankan government is sort of uniquely sensitive. And I think, but there are other governments that are very sensitive, right, and shoot back and mouth back. I think the difficulty here is that there's no, in every other situation. For example, Ban even grandstands a bit with Sudan in order to show, the U.S., the U.K., George Clooney, the Enough Project, which we'll get to, that he's doing this work, which is good. And I think in this conflict, although there's the same, he's trying to make a call to show restraint and have a ceasefire. There's sort of no, and this is where I think he should be more principled and just do it the same, even if he's not under the same pressure on both sides. But in this case, it's true. There's very little pressure. There's very few member states that are saying, like, hey, tell the government of Sri Lanka to slow down or to, respect civilians more. Maybe India, but they would prefer it not be through the UN. The UK, mostly because they have Tamil protesters in the streets of London. So that Foreign Minister Miliband has said, was called to task on one of those, back and forth parliamentarian debates only this week. And he said, don't worry, we're trying to do what we can in New York, but, and this is, I think you'll appreciate this. He said, but it's worse to put forward a resolution and have it vetoed than not to put it forward at all. Which is very strange because the UK is not proposing any resolution here. I mean, that's why I want to be clear. All that's going to take place tomorrow is a closed-door humanitarian briefing. Now, probably
right. But perhaps this is the first step.
Right? No, you're absolutely right. This is how it's.
Right. You have to start.
Oh, absolutely. No, exactly. That's what I mean. I just mean in terms of like expectations. It's not like, and I think that's. But I thought it was strange personally that the British foreign minister would say, because they're not putting forward a resolution. And also the irony, also just on the side, like the UK was willing to, along with the US, put forward a Zimbabwe resolution in the middle of 2008, which was vetoed. Double vetoed, and they still called the vote on it. So there's sort of to say, like, we're not doing much on Sri Lanka because it would be vetoed and that would embolden the government. That they didn't use that strategy vis-a-vis, Zimbabwe. Anyway, I don't mean to be too, but those have been the sort of like factual. And then just like on the ground today, there was a Tamil newspaper editor that was picked up by the police without a warrant to be questioned. I do want to go out of my way, not only because of this, Mossad and other emails I'm receiving, just to say that the Tamil Tigers have certainly done a lot of bad things. They flew a plane and bombed and injured a lot of people during these last 2 weeks, and just over the course of time. I'm no supporter of their techniques, but as in most other cases, that doesn't mean that it's like open season on